It's time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and I want you to, I don't often ask you to do this, but unless you're driving, I would ask you to close your eyes. I want to imagine yourself maybe in a hospital setting or maybe thinking of that loved one in your life that needs, oh, I don't know, a life-saving organ like a kidney. I want you to think, okay, you happen to be a match for that individual. And so you make the assignment, the election in your life that you're like, you know what, I'm going to donate that kidney to save the life or improve the life of another person. And then when you find out, or when you go to get approved for that procedure, you find out, oh, hey, I got cancer. Now open your eyes, and we're going to hear all about this story from my guest, Jeff Stewart. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
No, thank you so much for having me, Richie. Really appreciate it.
You know, is that story pretty, I mean, it's abbreviated, I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to the elongated version, but is that about what it was?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was trying to donate a kidney. For those of you that have ever considered, at least in your mind, of donating a kidney might be something you might want to do. I work in the biomedical field. Donating a kidney is safe. There is no difference in mortality or morbidity for somebody who donates a kidney versus not. There's really just no risk to it. Your remaining kidney will grow like a starfish. It's really cool. It like more than doubles in size at the right for some people, and it takes over the function of the other one. If you have one kidney go, usually the other kidney goes normally. So you're fine donating a kidney. And that's what I came into things thinking, well, it's going to hurt.
Sure.
It's going to be unpleasant.
It's not a walk in the park. It's not like, oh, yeah, hey, I donated a kidney at, for breakfast, and at lunch I'm running a marathon, but
yeah, but save a person's life. I mean, and realistically, it saves a person's life. I tried several years to do this, including at different places. Why it took so long was because I had gastric bypass more than a decade ago, and they were kind of gun shy about having somebody with gastric bypass. But on my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th hospital trying to do this was Duke, which is local in town, where I live in North Carolina. They said, okay. And we got through right up to the final screening, CT scan. So one of those you get in the box, and it's got a large ring around it, and you're going through.
And it does the thing too, where it goes, and you're like, is this the end? Is this what the end is like? That's what I always feel like whenever I do a CT scan.
It's too funny.
Or I think, man, if I have to lay on my back for one more second, it seems like it takes forever and is so uncomfortable.
Got through the CT scan, and then opened up my results on my computer, and which I can kind of read myself, like, oh, I have a tumor in one of my kidneys, and oh, I also have a tumor on my intestines. So I have 2 tumors, and let me tell you, that's not great news. Like, that's really bad news. But I can't tell you, Richie, how lucky this was to have gotten this diagnosis.
Yeah, tell me why, because I hear that, and that does not seem lucky to me.
It does not. I mean, but the alternative, besides just not having cancer, which would have been fantastic, obviously. But if you're going to have cancer, you don't really want to have what's called a renal cell carcinoma, one of these tumor kidneys, or kidney tumors, because they're so often silent that when they're discovered, they're lethal. So discovered early, which means usually resolvable by surgery, like right away. Same thing with what they thought was the stomach cancer or the intestinal cancer that I had. Now, it turned out the intestinal cancer I have is much, much more serious, but either I got a chance at having myself cured through surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, or I have warning that I wouldn't have had. I mean, they never would have discovered the intestinal cancer until it was too late, because it wasn't sitting on my normal intestines. It wasn't sitting and what turned out to be a stomach cancer through my normal stomach. It was in the bypassed stomach and the bypassed intestine. So you could look down there all day. In fact, I'd had an upper GE, an upper gastro test, like scoping, the month before. Nothing. They can't see anything because there's nothing to see. So the incredible good fortune of having a CT scan randomly, finding these, I mean, it's beyond belief lucky. So it either saved my life or gave me the time to get affairs in order and figure out what to do with what I want to do with the rest of my life, which is why I've been writing.
So I take me. Well, let's not go there yet. What drives a person like yourself, Jeff, to want to do something like this? All of us have, or most of us, I guess I should say, have two kidneys, but there are some that are like, you know what, that can be someone else's deal, or
Yeah.
I'm too scared, or whatever the thing is. What drives you to have even wanted to do this? Tell me a little bit about yourself as far as that goes.
Well, part of it is, of course, just our upbringing as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That gives us the idea that we ought to do what we can to relieve others' suffering. We ought to do what we can to stand as, a savior for others if we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I pair that also with my own training. I'm trained in molecular biology, and I work to understand things like this. Things like, how risky is it to donate a kidney? I know how to look up those papers. I can research it. I can look through it and figure it out. So my own sense, it's not, maybe not the same position everybody else would be in, where it's not only something hard to do, but a big unknown, a huge, like, I don't know how dangerous that is. What if I need that kidney? Well, I've read the papers to know you don't really need the other kidney. So I'm in that kind of position, and I can read the mortality papers and really understand them enough to have all of those excuses, though really valid excuses. But for me now, they're just excuses. I know they're excuses. So that seemed like just seemed like the right thing to do. I don't know. I mean,
take me through some of the emotions though, because as you experience it, and this is sans the cancer. Trust me, everybody, we're getting there. But I am sort of curious. I imagine would be this sort of roller coaster. As I put myself in your position, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to save somebody's life. Yeah. I'm going to literally be, and maybe this gets into a little bit of a complex psychologist, so let me know if that's what it is, but I'm literally going to be able to save the life of another person. That feels pretty good.
Well, and if you think of the times, probably you have had times where you've helped someone, sincerely help them, really done something that materially offered their life, even perhaps saved someone's life. That feels pretty good.
Yeah.
And if I'm selfish about it, I wanted to feel pretty good about having done that, to at least feel that I had made that use of my existence. And so I wouldn't feel so guilty maybe about not doing something when I could have helped.
Yeah.
When it wasn't the easiest thing. And it scared me plenty because I don't like pain. Sure. I don't like pain at all. I wasn't looking forward to any of that stuff. So there was at least a little bit of courage to kind of keep going back, hearing no and then trying somewhere else. But the other side is it's just really, truly horrific. People that are on dialysis. I mean, my life expectancy right now for my cancer is, 50-50. Like I have a roughly 50% chance of dying from this cancer. And if I die very quickly. And if I live unusually for the rest of my life without cancer. I mean, it's really that weirdly kind of two options, bimodal. But you take a patient with dialysis, they're at about the same position for 5 years. It's almost like a cancer diagnosis in terms of how lethal it can be. It's about as bad as I am now for just random person who's on dialysis with a kidney failure. So it's not just improving someone's lifestyle, though it does improve someone's lifestyle, but it is in fact saving their life. So that is something that felt like it was something that I could do with a measure of my existence. As a religious belief, I don't want to be at the end of, at the end of my existence to say, Jeff, you knew better. You should have done it. So I don't mean to put that burden on other people, but that's a burden I felt myself.
Was it a God confirmed burden? Did you have religious experiences around it?
No, I didn't. It just seemed like the right thing to do.
Okay. I'm curious too, because you made your mind up about this. I'm your partner. Do you have a wife? Yes.
Yeah.
how was that sell?
She wasn't thrilled until the cancer diagnosis. She just thought it was like, you're gonna want that other kidney. I'm like, yeah, but look at the paper. She's not in the biomedical field, so it's not the same,
Sure.
but for me, I can. And I just, really, the risk was zero. It's as close to zero that nobody can tell the difference.
A sort of sidebar, maybe instructional thing. Do you have any sort of pieces of advice? Because I think that this is the case in most relationships. One person feels real passionate about this, and the other person goes, "What? No." Or I have lots of reservations about this. I think it's few times that you have both people on board being like, yeah, we should, and then you do, and then I will, and then we'll get this. Any sort of instruction, pieces of advice, things that you would say, do or do not say as you engage with a partner talking about some sort of donation like that?
Well, when we talk about doing good things that are a little bit beyond somebody, our partner's comfort zone, I know Jennifer does things like that all the time. Who's my
That's your
wife?
wife? Yeah.
Yeah. She's invited people to live in our home long term. People that just kind of need a housing, something like that. Am I comfortable with that? No, I'm an introvert. I don't. That is not. That's the last thing on my mind of something to do. But by letting her take the lead on something like that, she pulls me along into, being a better person. Frankly, now I don't know that pulls her along into being a better person when I'm kind of the one out there doing it. But I didn't. Maybe it's wrong of me, Richie, not to have really gotten her on board before doing it. But it just seemed like the right thing to do. So maybe just go ahead and do it. I try not to think too very hard about whether or not I should do the right thing if I really feel strongly it's the right thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll just chicken out.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, as we sort of take that emotional thing, like it's like, yeah, I'm the savior. I'm helping save lives. And then I think it'd be me, like whether it comes when I'm doing that last CT scan or right before I'm about to go under, and they're gonna, I always like to use the term harvest because it makes me think of the horror movies. Don't worry, I'm just trying to scare everybody. But right before they take that organ, like I feel like I'd be like, what have I done? Like this in this immediate impending doom. So it's just like the highest highs and the scariest scares as you're kind of walking this path.
Yeah, I just try to put the blinders on, not think about that part of it.
Yeah. I want to take a break real quick. When we come back in the second block, I want to pick it up right when you find out about the tumors and walk us through that, both the literal what was going on, where you were, and how you did that, and then kind of emotionally and spiritually what occurred. So we'll do that. We'll come back in the second block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, remember that there is a couple of groups which you can be a part of. One that costs nothing and one that takes a little bit of your hard-earned money and puts it towards this great cause. The first one, the Cultural Hall Back Row, it is a Facebook group that doesn't cost anything. Over 300 people hanging out there and having tangential conversations about various parts of this episode. Jeff mentioned that he's in North Carolina. We won't be talking about his cancer diagnosis in the Cultural Hall Back Row. People will be talking about their favorite restaurants in North Carolina. That's sort of the spirit of what that group is. So you can join that, and please do. It's a great free place to hang out. And then if you feel so inclined, you have a couple shekels you'd like to put towards the Cultural Hall, you can go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall, become a Patreon saint for as little as $5 a month. It helps a ton, and it just lets me know that you appreciate the now over 700 episodes that we have published in the 12 years of doing this thing. So thank you to everyone who does that. You pulled up on your app or on your, the interface that you have with the hospital, the fact that you had tumors. Is that you and your doctor is right alongside you and like, hey, look at this? Or you found it out in the presence of your own home? You're out, getting some groceries and just decided to see if your results were pulled up. Talk to me about that moment.
Yeah. I think I was home when I did it and just pulled up got an alert that the test results were available. So I just kind of went through them. Certainly didn't expect to see anything. I mean, what would I see? They're really checking to make sure you have 2 kidneys, not cancer. That was the farthest thing from my mind. And seeing them, it was like, oh, that's not good. And oh, that's not good either. Pretty quickly, the doctors were able to hook me up with the at that time the surgical oncologist because the cancers looked extremely resolvable. So thankfully, at the time, it felt like cancer on easy mode. Seriously, Richie, it was like cancer on easy mode. Like I'm gonna have to have surgery, but the recovery rate on what they thought the cancer was in my was in my kidney was like 97% cure rate. Something similar for what they thought was it's a kind of intestinal tumor called a GIST, and that also has a really high cure rate and has a really good targeted chemotherapy that you take orally. So like together, it's like, okay, this is not going to be great, but it's curable. And so at that point, my thoughts turned a bit towards just kind of letting people on social media kind of know what was going on, because I'm used to explaining things from a scientific perspective, and people have found that to be helpful. Sure. So yeah, I've got this easy cancer diagnosis. Why not just kind of let people follow along? And so I started doing that. It wasn't until after surgery and several weeks later that we got the pathology report back, and it was not the GIST tumor on my intestine, the one that's really easily curable, that you can take a targeted immunotherapy. It wasn't one of those. It was a very, very bad cancer that had invaded the entire wall of my stomach, and one that is really hard to spot. Generally, it has to somehow make this the secondary tumor for you to see it. It could be spread more widely. They would never have done surgery on it back if they had known. They just would have given me hardcore chemo, and so that and start me on radiation. So that's what we entered into then, and that's when life psychologically changed a lot for me, because it wasn't cancer on easy mode anymore.
Talk to me how that goes. I in poor taste, jokingly mentioned, well, everyone will die of a cancer of some kind. And I know that's horrible, and I'm a horrible person. I'll label myself as such. I recognize that. But I mean, it seems because of its, existence and everyone, you don't just die. I don't think, maybe you can tell me, you don't just sort of die. It's something takes you ultimately. That cancer seems to be the top of that. The realization of your own mortality is the thing that I think we all know we're going to pass at some point, but it almost, when I hear about like cancer diagnoses, I guess my mind goes, oh, and now that sentence has a period at the end.
It does. Yeah.
So talk to me about that. You said it shifts. What did it shift to? How did you engage in that differently?
Well, at that point, especially for a little while, they thought it was even more advanced than it is. So it seemed quite lethal. But eventually we got back to this point. 50% chance that it will kill me if it progresses in like 6 months. Like that's one bucket. Other bucket, you are already cured, or you will be cured very quickly, and you won't know it for 2 years. You'll just have to keep watching it, and then you're cured, and you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief. So that now changed how, at least, I don't know about you, but I think about my life, my career, what I need to do, what I don't need to do, in about a 5-year increment. What I can make investments for 5 years of my life, and things better at the end of 5 years, then that I probably have made a good investment. It's kind of like a middle ground of how I live. Not that I think I'm dying in 5 years, but that's, I'm thinking about 10 years, 20 years down the road as something that I might do. I still might like to do something that is going to pay off right away, of course, but I could consider changing a job as an example. If it's going to make more money, but it's going to be an investment of a couple of years of like learning, how it is, potentially I'd have to move. Okay, I can think about that. Sure. All that's gone. Now I live in a land that feels like I'm Schrodinger's cat. I have instead Schrodinger's cancer. So if anybody's familiar with Schrodinger's cat, the one that's half alive and half dead, this kind of physics experiment, like mind experiment, like that was me, where I've got to keep in mind that whatever I do has to be really important if I live a long time, and really important if I die quickly. So it was a major shift in how I started thinking through things, where I really felt, and that is what really led me to not just posting on Facebook what was going on with me, but thinking about what could I do that would leave a legacy, especially for my kids.
we'll get into the book that is out now that it sort of takes in a lot of what you're talking about. I'm curious as to the conversation with your spouse. Is she at the appointment with you? I mean, this hits a spouse different than it hits the person it's affecting. Walk me through that as best you can.
Yeah, no, I would try to buffer that for my wife, honestly, because part of what, and this isn't going to be the natural thing that most people have to do. There's a little bit of going into the oncologist and showing off to them that I know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And my questions aren't always going to be the smartest questions,
Mm-hmm.
but because I worked in a cancer lab. I'm used to figuring out something like cancer or a specific type of cancer and what the treatments are, what the pluses and minuses are, what's in development in a matter of a week. That is my job.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
Thursday for me.
Jeez.
So that's fine. I can do that, but I needed the time to be able to get the doctors, who are fantastic, but they've got to think of themselves as kind of counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I say this, that this person's really not ready to hear, something like death odds or something like that,
Sure.
or really go into details. So I maintain a buffer for a while. As smart as my wife is, it's just something that I want to establish a professional relationship, not just a patient relationship with my doctors. Once I'd gotten there, that I was able to bring my wife in and have her ask the questions that, if they had been asked at the beginning, may have made her feel more comfortable, but also would have put the doctors on a different path of how they related with me. Based on this kind of relationship that we were able to get, I'm not saying it's a peer relationship, because they are experts and I am a pseudo expert on something like this, an expert that can read a whole, I read hundreds of abstracts of the latest gastric international meeting to be able to find out what actually is important, what actually is not. I could do that and then talk to my doctors about it, but they are the real experts. I don't mean to say anything different, but based on the trust that we were able to establish when the pathologist made something that was, I'm not saying a mistake, but confused everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get them off of what everybody thought the answer was, to have them really take a second look at something. And really, how often do you get a doctor to do that? And the worst thing a doctor also wants is somebody comes in with some paper, that is probably from a bad journal,
Sure.
doesn't really apply for some reason they don't get. Well, I had a little bit of ability to bring in a paper and say, look, for this mutation, this is what it actually looks like for prognosis. Do you agree? And they took the time to be able to do that. And it wasn't, I just wanted to establish that rapport with them to be able to get there.
From an empathy or charity point of view, what do people like? I always get so anxious about it with anything, if I'm being quite candid. If anyone has anything that is hard for them, man, I love that person. And I just am I do that thing where I just sort of sit and show up, or if they can give me a list of grocery store things, I'm really good at that. What on the the charity, the empathy side of things, what made you feel loved by those that were around you, and or how should people show up when that loved one in their life gets this kind of diagnosis?
Well, I'll tell you, Richie, let me start from the side that's really bad, but it's
Okay.
really understandable. And I'm not talking about people just being, cancer patients just being prickly about what you're telling them to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's super understandable that as soon as you hear someone has cancer, you think of the supplement that you heard of that would help cancer, the person who claims that they have 100% cure rates, and you know what, they sound really convincing when they do it, or even the article that you saw in the latest copy of Science magazine or something like that, that talks about some treatment that is years away but sounds really interesting to you, so you should show them. The reason that we should avoid this impulse is sad but simple. People that take alternative therapies as opposed to evidence-based medicine, what the doctors will tell them to do, the ones that take those alternative therapies die at twice the rate of people that just do what their doctors tell them. Twice.
Wow.
There is essentially no drug out there that cures cancer that well to be able to change that rate. The best thing you could do for them is not give such advice. And here's why people tend to do it. I think you want to solve their problem,
Right.
you want to solve it, you want to help. The best help, I would say, is, I mean, honestly, it's not even be strong, it's not even fight that cancer. I'm not fighting the cancer, my doctors are. I'm the battleground. My body is the place where the cancer is being fought. They're fighting it with chemotherapy that blows up DNA. They're fighting it with radiation that blows up DNA and keeps it from being able to replicate. That's the battle. They're fighting it. I'm showing up, and that's what the cancer patient can do. Now, honestly, the cancer patient has only a few things that they must do besides just follow directions. They've got, I'm the only one who can be the father reading to my youngest daughter. I'm the only one who can get all my passwords together if things turn lethal. I'm the only one that can agree to get a will if I need to get a will, and the time is short. We have a friend of the family who didn't get a will in time and just died of lung cancer. So I mean, that's and now probate for the survivors. I mean, those things require effort and attention, and it's a diversion from that when we're going down all the, you should eat this food, you should go and you should get this supplement, you should talk to this doctor who is in Mexico that has something based on peach pits, and I'm not making these things up, those are real things.
Sure.
And avoid that part. Just sit with them in their pain, and that's enough. That's enough for most people. Sometimes all you have to do is hold the light for a little bit. Sometimes that's all you have to do.
Is it a thing? Because I guess my mind goes, and asking questions as those who might be listening to this. Is it a thing where when we talk about sitting with someone, I think this is one of the most powerful and one of the most difficult things. Like, do you bring it up as the person caring for the person? Do you wait for them to bring it up? Do you mentioned that it's your body that's fighting. Is it like, hey, good looking body, Jeff, keep that body healthy, you want to go for a run? Like,
yeah.
I think it really is instructive, and we can't have too many conversations about like what that, mourning with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort, what that really looks like. Because man, we all made the covenant to do it, and I think we do it meh.
Yeah. Well, a neutral open gives the person the opportunity to talk about it if they want to talk about it or not. How are things going? How are you feeling? Likely they're probably, I'm guessing, that most people are either invested in it and want to talk about it, or really trying to ignore things as much as possible and live their life, so that they don't have to think about it, and they can usually direct you there. Though in honesty, and it's part of the book is going through some of the things I've learned in life, things I wanted my kids to learn and understand, so that they would kind of have these pieces or proverbs or adages or life lessons that would really inspire them in the future. One of them is that if you're trying not to think about it all the time, that's just freaking exhausting. Yeah. It's terrible. You're just, it exhausts you mentally, it exhausts you physically not to think about something. And people that have horrible experiences, and I mean the most horrible experiences, the more they tell and the worse details that they tell about those experiences, the better that they are afterwards. And that's shown from a study out of Israel, from Holocaust survivors, that the ones that told their story for the first time said the worst stuff with the most details, not only said they felt better than those that didn't do it, but went to the hospital less for like years afterwards. It's being able to tell someone things that are troubling to you is really helpful. So you're doing more than you know to help someone just by being there and talking where they want to go, where they'll let you go.
Humor plays a big role in it, as far as at least how I feel like I can show and share love with people. I'm not sure if you where you're listening is with the Cultural Hall, but there is one of our previous hosts who, I guess we call him host emeritus, Brother Kyle, whom still alive, still with us, but was diagnosed with bulbar ALS now almost 2 years ago. And
That's a hard diagnosis.
oh my gosh. And it was misdiagnosed at first. It was, you have this. No, you don't have it. Celebrate. Oh no, just kidding. You do have this. And so just brutal. But it seems to me, and I don't know if there have been the scientific investigations into this or studies about this, but like those that have the ability to still laugh or find joy, or you're not making cancer the butt of the jokes, but you're making cancer because of or making jokes because of the cancer or something. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase that, but it seems to me that those who are able to laugh at the atrocities, to be able to share comically those things, that has a physical impact on either healing or dealing.
We've certainly made our share of Breaking Bad jokes.
Yeah.
At our house, my kids got me a Walter White hat, and then photoshopped me in pictures of New Mexico, which was nice. And so there are parts that are funny about the experience that are worth thinking through. I don't know how much humor. I do worry a little bit, honestly, with my kids that I'm being a little bit too flippant sometimes with it, so that it makes it hard for them to process things sometimes. But being walking around the house moping, being cancer dad, probably not so fun either. So I don't know. It's maybe the least, not a good answer, but a least bad answer is to be, find the humor you can in the situation.
Yeah. I want to take another break. In the third block, we're going to dive straight into the book, what it is, who it's for, and maybe get you to tell us a story or two from it. We'll come back and do that in the third block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, I would encourage you to be an active listener of the Cultural Hall. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, I would love it if you would share either on social media or in a text message this episode of the Cultural Hall, or if you're like, well, I don't know that this suits my fancy, is something that I'd want to share, find another episode of the Cultural Hall and share that with someone, or just on your social media. Or if there's someone in your life that might be going through a particular thing, whether it's this episode or another, you feel like we do a good job talking about that thing, I would love it if you would share that episode with them. Point is, a lot of people find a lot of great value about it. They just don't know where to find it or that it exists. And you can be a pivotal role in exposing new people to the Cultural Hall. So take a minute, think about it. Think about maybe your favorite episode of the Cultural Hall. You could share that as well. Thank you in advance. TIA. All right. So Jeff, you have written this book. The book is called Living: Inspiration from a Father with Cancer. And I have to tell you, one thing that I really appreciate is that the title of your book lets me know what it's about. Sometimes you get these titles and you go, I don't know what this is. Spot on as far as that goes. Is there a story behind why you decided to call it that?
So the thing I really wanted my kids to have, so I have 7 kids. I was going to get that out of the way. So we've got a big family, and I've spent my time finding those places where I can build them up. Sometimes there's something that I've thought of for years. Here's a way to think about it that really helps either avoid pain or endure pain. Something that's really terrible, hard times. It's good to know that there are some things that are there that can really help you endure hard times. Even something as simple as, if you're feeling really bad, just wait for the morning. Get a good night's sleep. It will be better in the morning. I can't say it's all better, but it'll be better. Like that's one of them. Even though it's a simple thing, that gets you an idea of the sort of thing that I wanted to make sure that my kids would have in case I'm not there to be able to give them this life advice myself. And some of it is very, very kind of workaday life advice.
Like what?
Get one good kitchen knife.
Okay.
And here's how you use it. That changes how you cook. If you have one good knife that's really sharp. Okay. How do you invest? Like, what's the easiest way? What's the most important thing to invest? Some background. my valuation method for biotech firms is the most used method now on Wall Street and in pharma. So
Wow.
I'm very familiar with how to think about finance in the finance world. I'm not an expert in every part of finance, only a narrow subset, but I also know the basic what works and what doesn't work for big time investment, and that is invest simply and avoid fees.
Mm.
Just get a mutual fund with the lowest possible fees, and that's better than almost anything else you could possibly do.
Hmm.
Even Warren Buffett, when he like made a bet on what he wanted to bet against somebody else, which one will win, he just bet on the mutual fund that is like the stock market with the lowest possible fees. I mean, that is the route that very many smart people who are otherwise out there that know how to pick stocks, they don't pick stocks. They try to get the whole market basket.
Crypto, Jeff. My
Crypto, no.
My Doge, Jeff. I'm rolling in Doge right now.
Okay,
Really.
Good for you. I wish you well. So there's some that are very practical like that. Others are pieces of like life advice about how you think about relationships.
Okay, give me a relational one.
So a relational one might be that falling in love is not the same thing as being in love.
Ooh.
Those two things seem like they're the same. If you think that the feeling of falling in love is going to be the feeling of being in love, you are set up for disappointment, my friend. Because that feeling of forming a pair bond, forming that relationship is its own thing, and it always fades. So people think something's gone wrong with my marriage because that feeling is gone, but that is not the feeling of being in love. That's the feeling of falling in love. And you only get that from that heady time at the beginning when you can think of nothing else. And you can only think, and oh boy, I'm looking, have they texted me back? Like that's a part that's different than the feeling of being in love. You can get those things wrong, et cetera. Then you're going to be in some serious trouble.
Are there things that your family didn't know about you? Maybe things that you had kept close to the vest, or like, hey, you don't read the later chapters until I pass, or something like that. Things that maybe they were surprised as they engaged with this book.
I don't know that they would be surprised by anything. We're pretty open about what we talk about, and even the things that might be they didn't know it. Something that happened in my life. Maybe not all of them knew it. I'm sure my youngest, who's 12, doesn't know about the times that I was going through depression or something like that. She doesn't know that. So she'll have that maybe at a time that's more appropriate for her, but it isn't because I was avoiding telling her. It's just it hadn't come up with her. But the older ones know. So I don't think that they're reading it and going, "Wow, Dad, I had no idea," but more, "Oh, that kind of crystallizes some of the things that you've thought about."
What takes the leap from like, this is a thing that you wrote just for your family? I think it's a treasure, right? It's why there's the popularity of things like Storyworth, that company that gives you writing prompts, and then you write the things out, and then it comes together in a book, and you can order copies for family and extended family. What's the leap from like, this is great for the Stewart family of 9 to, hey, maybe this is a greater audience?
So the cancer story in part is what does that. What I don't expect telling my cancer story to my kids who lived it is really going to tell them a ton, maybe some about what it was like to live through it, so that they're not surprised on it. But what I would hear from those who are either early readers or ones who are following along on Facebook, I would get the following message. And I've gotten it more than once. I never knew what my parents were going through when they had cancer, or grandma had cancer, or grandpa had cancer. And I finally understand. They didn't want to talk about it, and now I get it. Or the person who called me up and from work, who said, "I've told nobody but my wife and my priest and my boss, but I have cancer." And they were so scared. They were so scared, Richie. And just that idea that you can give somebody something that makes it feel a little bit less frightening with something like this. And part of the book also that I think you get out of it. So you get those two things out of it. That's what makes it, I think, more kind of broadly interesting. And I I don't mean to put too fine a point on this, but my life's been pretty strange, and it's had some interesting turns. If some of you are either hearing my voice or seeing my face, for those of you that get the video, I might look a little familiar. I might sound a little familiar. If you think back to the person who won Jeopardy when college tournament at BYU in 1994, and then got second in the Tournament of Champions, that is me.
Hey,
I went through that.
Hey, wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so there are parts of my life that are I mean, I like to write it just because I like people to know my story a little bit, but I think there are also some parts that are relevant and just kind of interesting that would that bring people through that. And something like that, where I'm not frightened by high risk situations, at least to some kind of high risk situations. There are a few things that are so frightening as being in front of television, in front of millions of people, and knowing that you could look like a complete idiot on something you really, really care about. Like right. that is a high stress situation. And the fact that I do so much within science in the field right now means that when I'm seeing something like cancer coming at me like it's a bull, I'm not frozen in the way that it might be natural to be frozen. I'm sitting there looking, okay, well, there it is. This is how long I have. This is how long the Jeopardy final music goes. This is how I have to turn. Here's my sword. I've got to turn and get it and survive this. Or at least I know what I have to do to make my chances reasonably high. And that sense, and that's not to pat myself on the back, but if the fact that I can describe it this way, in ways that explain what's going on, explain what chemotherapy is, explain for somebody who doesn't know what chemotherapy really is. It's just that thing you don't want to have. Explain what radiation therapy is. It's just that, which otherwise sounds just as frightening as anything could be. I mean, it sounds like a death ray, that you're getting, or you're getting nuked. Though, by explaining those things, it makes them more understandable for people that might have to go through the same thing. And then once you understand something, I find that it's just not nearly as frightening. It doesn't mean that it's safe. It doesn't mean that I'll survive. It just means that once you understand it, it isn't quite so terrible. I think of Fred Rogers and how he kind of describes things. To paraphrase him, anything that can be talked about can be dealt with. Then once you're able to talk about it and face it, then it's something that you can deal with. And so talking about it has already helped people. And I'm just trying to turn what could be my death into something that makes it worth something. So I've done my absolute best to try to do that. And that's what you get out of reading the book.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Super inspirational, super giving, especially to those people that, don't know or have the way to talk about it, to be able to read and maybe be able to open up to those that love and care about them. I'm curious, as you look at your life today, if I'm understanding, it's sort of dice roll, right? 50-50.
Yep.
We'll see any moment, that kind of thing. And then as you look back at your life, what if there was one thing that you do different now that you didn't do until you had this diagnosis? What is it, and what can we learn from that?
Well, I can say some of the things what I did get the chance to do, and it is an absolute gift. Having a very serious diagnosis is a huge gift, because you get to learn from yourself what things you'll do when you're in that situation, when it might be more serious or might be imminent. You get the chance to see those things where your life isn't in order and you want them to get in order. Or if you've really gotten things more or less in order, or at least you think you do, then you can have that comfort. It surprised me sometimes, though, that I think I have things in order, and then I go through the situation and it feels like, wow, I thought I really had that one figured out, but I was pretty emotional when we actually got to it. But for me, like which things to get into order and some things like that, I didn't feel as though I had, and maybe this damns me, but I didn't feel like I had a lot of repentance to do. But I certainly looked back on, and I didn't feel bad about lots of mistakes I've made. What I felt bad about, and I still feel some, some pain about, were times when I knew the right thing to do and I just didn't do it.
Mm.
Those ones I feel pretty damning of those. And sometimes they're really small things. Gosh, but they hurt. I can remember the time. I can remember it now, when growing up back in rural Oregon, playing on a baseball team, and Buffy Schwartz was up there as a female pitcher when there just weren't girls on teams. And I repeated the line that I read, I'm pretty sure, in Peanuts, of, go home and do the dishes, and that was me. I did that. I did that horrible thing. I said that. I said it not once. I said it lots of times, trying to rattle her as a pitcher. Her parents were probably in the bleachers. It's a pretty small field. I feel awful about that. And so part of the chance to kind of face your life is to see the things that you did wrong and make a change before it's potentially too late. One more kind of like on that, change before it's too late.
Sure.
I'd moved from New Jersey, where I was going to school, to New Mexico, where I was going to work at Los Alamos, the famous nuclear weapons lab. I was so excited. Work at the nuclear weapons lab.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm there, and I'm going to church, and a guy named Bob gets up there, and Bob starts going through how thankful he was that the home teachers showed up and really have just been so good to him, because at the last time he just didn't have anybody show up at all. The last home teacher just never showed up. And Bob's voice started sounding a little familiar to me. And I looked up across the country, back in New Jersey. Guess who that home teacher was? It was me. It was me. And so I got having that kind of, oh man, you just failed. You didn't show up, allowed me also to have the time when I did show up years later here with Pat, who was in a nursing home and just wanted to die. And I was able to come, and her TV was unplugged. She just kind of sit in the dark all the time. She couldn't see very well, just telling us every time that she just kept praying to die. She didn't remember my name, but she kept telling me how many times she wanted to die. And we watched conference together. I got my little card at the time, and it was the first time she'd seen it in years. I read Pride and Prejudice to her, thinking that would be something that might carry her from one day to the next, to the week to the next, until she died of natural causes, or a respiratory disease before COVID. But I wouldn't have shown up, I don't think, for Pat if I hadn't had the really awful experience of being shown what happens when you don't show up. So that's part of also what you get from the chance to think through your regrets in life. That's been it. Like, that's been the real regret that I've had, is when I did the wrong thing, when I knew what the right thing was to do.
Wow. Jeez. So poignant, so powerful. There are 3 questions that we ask everyone who steps into the cultural hall. I'll ask those of you here in a second, but worth the couple seconds to say, listen, everyone will die, and you don't want to spend the last moments of your life doing those things like putting a will together, or, putting, if you have a short-ish time, whatever that, defined by however, that's not the time that you're going to want to spend doing passwords or explaining financial things to those who, when you're able, take the time, the short amount of time, you can knock them off little by little to be able to do it, so that if you get the blessing to know of when your time is coming, you can spend it doing the important things, not the have to things because you put them off. That's my small soapbox, but my family, if nobody else, for crying out loud, I wish they would hear it. I'm like, what? You don't have a will? You don't have any idea how this is going to happen? Do you hate us? That's the thing that drives me crazy. The 3 questions. The first question is, do you have a calling, sir? And if so, what is it?
So I'm social media specialist for our stake.
Awesome. You love it?
I loved it when I was healthier.
Yeah.
I just got done with radiation last week.
Okay.
Hopefully my final treatment, and honestly, radiation was a real drag.
Ooh.
I'm not gonna lie. Who knew radiation's
Yeah.
a drag?
Yeah.
And as the time went on, it just became more and more tiring to do even that little bit. Hopefully I'll love it again.
Yeah. If you could pick a calling for yourself, either one that exists or make one up, what would you pick?
This is going to sound terrible. I would love to be a patriarch. I don't, but I don't. I mean, well, one doesn't exactly aspire to that and put that on their, hand out resumes trying to get such a thing.
Sure, but unique and super busy, at least after this last general conference, for sure. I'm sure these guys are inundated with people requesting their patriarchal blessings.
Maybe I need to rethink that. Then I want something easier. Maybe just keep it the social media or or choir.
But unique in the way that it's those that I've talked to about it, and we're actually a future episode, we're talking to a patriarch about how thin the veil can be at times, and that the blessing that comes from that. So maybe it would benefit, even though be really hard. The final question we ask everyone, and ask you to interpret it however you may. The question remains: what is your favorite part of your faith?
Choose the right, let the consequence follow. Like that, and that's also one of, not choose the right specifically, but keep your conscience. Let no one else keep it for you. That's something that I also keep in the book. It's so easy for us to hand our conscience over to someone else, but you know better. Yeah. We've been taught to know better. We all know better. Choose the right. Just do the right thing. And sometimes it will be uncomfortable because you'll be the only person doing the right thing. And by the way, doing the right thing when the people doing the wrong thing are your people, that's the hard one. That's the really hard one. We can't look and see Helmut Hubener, the young boy that was speaking out against the Nazi that was his in Hamburg during the war. That was his branch president, and got executed for it. We can't think that person was good if we don't recognize that person had incredible choices to do, made the incredible choice to do the right when it was not the easy thing to do.
Sure.
So that's it.
Yeah. I love it. I hope this episode has nourished and strengthened your body, that if you're not healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week, and that when the time comes, you'll be able to travel home in safety. If you want to read a little bit more about Jeff, you want to be able to pick up his book, there will be a link in the show notes. So encourage you to go there to be able to purchase said book or other books. He may or may not have written another book or two that you could check out there. That's all I'm going to say about that. In the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of the Cultural Hall.